Oh, do you need me to
I'm
unlock it again?
talking with Kim, so I should really look towards her, right? Not towards the camera.
I mean, she's gonna look at kind of look at the camera in the intro and maybe look at you a little. You can look at the camera. Yeah, just speak freely. But yeah, I mean, I would treat it like you're just hanging out with a bud and talking about what you got going on, right? 1 second here. Let's get this bad boy going. So, yeah, like that. I'll just tell you that. We gotta
No.
wait.
I'm just thinking.
Don't do that.
I know, right?
Kim, come on.
Okay,
Wait,
I'm ready.
I
You tell
want to hear
me.
your best game day howl. Come on.
No, I can't. No.
You're laughing. That's good. Okay.
First time I had to get up in front of a news camera, and I was actually in the middle of training down with our PR person to train me how to interview. This was back before there was nothing here. We had a lot of equipment, and there was a water truck turning left to come in at the construction entrance. And you know, there's a mile of visibility, but the car plowed right into the back, and there were 2 people killed. And I'm sitting there.
Are you serious?
I'm sitting there in the training. This was down at
my
Scott
gosh.
Perrin and Associates. I don't know if you ever.
No, I'm not familiar.
They were a big PR firm at the time. And anyway, I got a call. I looked at him. I said, "This just happened. I got to get out there." And I was in the middle of training, and I come out here, and all of a sudden, you know, at our offices in Eagle, there's 2 television stations with their cameras there. And I
Wow.
was,
What
and I
a-
had- yeah.
what a training.
That's a way to get into
Wow.
it. Is your phone on airplane mode, Dan?
Mine turned it off.
Okay, perfect.
And mainly because you'd never know if it rang, because it rings in my hearing aids. And I'd be
Oh.
distracted listening to my phone ring.
Will my phone eventually turn off?
Not while it's recording.
Not while it's
I just hope
recording,
it
okay.
doesn't die, but
I think it should be okay.
I think we should be all right. Oh, I just noticed mine isn't level. Sorry about that. I thought I had everything good to go. Some things you just don't pick up. Okay. Doesn't look loud to me, but I guess it is. So. I was telling Kim, you know,
Talk loud.
it was funny kind of going through this process because I told Kim, I said, I always wondered why the hell it took so long. Now I know. All right, so this is recording again. So I took my shoes off because I'm going to be moving around and I don't want it to pick my
Okay.
steps up here. Okay, that's just a set of marker for me. All right, I think we are good to go. So
Okay.
Kim, go ahead and
Okay.
get your intro rolling.
Okay. Well, Dan, this is just incredible what's happening here in Avamore. I've lived here for 4 years. I've lived in a lot of different places, and I can't tell you the sense of community that I feel living here with my family. And
Oh, you were doing great. That was awesome. Do it again.
Okay.
That was so great. Share your story. Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Well, Dan, this is just incredible what's happening here in Avamore. I can't tell you how much it means to my family to have found a place like Avamore to live. We lived several different places with the United States Army, and I always longed for that sense of community, and I have just been absolutely blown away the past 4 years living here. We are friends with our entire street. We go on vacation together. We hang out every Friday night, and I see it happening all over the neighborhood at various stages of life, and it's just an incredible thing. And that, along with the open space that Avamore gives to us, it really is incredible. There's so many people just living in concrete jungles, wishing that they could have something wholesome, somewhere amazing for their family, for their kids to grow up. And I've heard Avamore described as Mayberry, and I would not disagree for 1 second. It really is incredible what's happening here in Avamore, and I'm so excited to sit down with you and just hear a little bit more about the history of Avamore, because there is so much history and it's fascinating. So before we get started, Dan, I want to give you a little cheers with the Camber Amber here from our very own brewery, Spring Creek Brewery. So cheers.
Cheers.
So Dan Richter is the managing partner here at Avamore. My name is Kim Holland. I'm an enthusiastic Avamore resident and also part of the Avamore resale team here. But before we get started, I just want you to briefly explain Avamore to somebody who doesn't know what it is.
Well, you've done a pretty good job talking about where we wanted to go. I grew up in a tiny little town in Montana. You know, it was a tiny town. I was a very great student there. I graduated in the top 6 of my class from high school. There were 6 of us.
I was going to say how many were there.
And my wife was a Navy brat. Her dad was a
Okay.
Navy pilot. She moved around a lot, and and she described her life just like mine. And I take her back to my hometown. She said, "Oh man, you grew up in Mayberry." So I mean, I've heard that so much.
Yeah.
And you know, it was just, I think, an incredible coincidence that I was able to meet the McLeod family. The McLeod family first settled right where we are today in over 108 years ago.
Wow.
Colin McLeod I was a Scottish immigrant who got off the train in Boise, and when asked later on why he got off in Boise, he said, "I didn't have enough money to go any further."
Thank goodness he didn't.
Well, anyway, Colin was a very visionary man. I didn't meet him. I mean,
He must have been.
But the family says that he bought this place. He bought some sheep, started working, for a sheep herder. He had enough money. He bought this little piece here, and he just continued buying land till he owned over 50,000 acres out here. And starting off from a guy that got off the train with not enough money, he was industrious.
That's
And
incredible.
as they say, the Scottish are very, very good at saving and spending their money. Well, obviously he proved that, but his vision, Sandy McLeod, who was Colin III, would say my grandpa was such a visionary. He knew that someday development was going to move this way. And he was
So
also
he could see that long ago. That amazes me.
Yeah, he could. Well, I guess growing up in Europe where there's not quite so much room and stuff, and you'd see that happening, but he realized that, and he also realized they were also won all kinds of awards for their stewardship of the land. Just the kinds of conservation things that they did when they, managed the land with their sheep and their cattle, and they used to grow. This whole valley used to grow alfalfa.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was actually a beautiful sight. All the alfalfa fields around these old barns, and this barn we're sitting in now is over 150 years old.
Yes, can you please tell me about this? Because as an Avamore resident, this is like a mysterious place. I don't know if you know that.
Mm-hmm.
We see it, we know it's been restored. We've heard maybe what's gonna happen with it. I've heard a couple different things though. And I feel privileged that I actually get to be in here because nobody gets to come in here yet. So.
Well, someday, this is going to be called the Howell.
Start again, Dan.
Someday, this barn we're in will be part of what we'll call the Howell Station Event Center.
Okay.
Howell was the man that homesteaded this, and he's the guy that Colin McLeod bought the place from years and years ago. Excuse me, the little fly is.
The fly's really trying to get you.
But Howell Station, in the days when Boise was a farm town where they grew produce, and they'd send produce up to the mines up in Pearl. I don't know if you know it, but I've been told that the town of Pearl, which there's nothing there now, when the gold was there, they had 5,000 people living there.
Oh.
And of course, Idaho City was the state capital, and that was a gold mining town. That was,
Was 5,000 actually a lot for a city
Well,
in
for-
Idaho that long ago? Kind of seems like a lot.
Yeah, well, that was a lot, and they were all there for the gold mines, and when gold played out, of course, they all left. But Howell Station, there weren't any state highways or anything. In fact,
Yeah.
The flat spot in the hill over here, that was a toll road where somebody built some roads for wagons.
Cool.
And there were 2 toll roads coming in up out of Boise, and just south of here is where they came together, and there was a gatekeeper.
And that flat spot is still there.
The flat spot is
That's
still
so
there. That's
neat.
the old toll road. And he would charge tolls for all the wagons going back and forth. And this was one of the main stops on the way up.
Oh, how cool.
This was the local post office for all of the homesteaders that lived out here. This was
Wow.
the blacksmith shop. This is where the stage stopped. So there's a lot of history that
Yeah, I'd
went
love
on
to
here.
see pictures of that. Are there pictures?
There are. We do have a whole bunch
Okay.
of pictures we can
Yeah.
share. But it was just an incredible history that goes with this land. And the McLeods
Yeah.
have had it, as I said, for 108 years now, and they want to preserve the history. And so that's why this is going to become the Howell Event Center. So we'll have,
That's going to be so
for our
neat.
community, we'll have weddings and family reunions and community parties. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, the barn is going to host its first community party
Next Saturday.
2 Saturdays from now.
Yeah, I'm very excited about that. We're all looking forward to it.
So as we try to clean up this, the old barn and the old house, we're finished with the barn now. There's still some stuff to do, but here in the next year we'll redo the old house.
And what will that be? Can we?
It'll be
say?
part of the event center, and
Okay.
it's I guess we haven't really decided exactly what the use is, but it'll play an integral part.
Well, that's going to be so
Of the
neat.
event
I've
center.
wondered why it was still there. I mean, I like that it's there, but everybody's curious, what will it actually be? So that's,
It'll be an integral part, and it
Yeah.
is such a historic building that it would be a shame
It would
if
be.
it wasn't preserved.
it would. I'm so glad it has been.
But Colin McLeod got off the train, got his sheep, and started, and bought this place, and it kept growing and growing. And he would tell his family, someday town is going to approach, and we got to do it right. You've got to do it
Yes.
right. The McLeods were so generous too. They knew everybody in town liked to hunt out here. They liked to come and hike the foothills. This was their place to, just get out of town. And the McLeods always invited them. It's like Sandy McLeod said, they just tell people, please help us take care of it. Clean up after yourself, but enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that was so important to them. And I guess when I met Sandy McLeod, and Terry McLeod, we just really just meshed, because we both wanted, I said, I want to be Mayberry, and that's what it is. That's where kids are safe. They can, I used to leave the house in the morning. My mother had 5 of us. We'd leave the house in the morning. She'd say, be back for dinner. And she didn't worry about it. So we'd do it all over that little town.
I mean, I grew up the same way, and I feel so lucky. My kids are elementary school aged, and I mean, they're in and out of their friends' houses, in the vicinity every day, and people are in and out of our house. And I think that can easily be taken for granted. I mean, I know there's other neighborhoods even within, the Treasure Valley that doesn't happen so easily. And it really is cool that we can let our kids go ride their bikes down to the gas station and grab a treat and come home. That's so fun for them. And it really is something that doesn't happen like it used to. So,
As I said, I grew up in a town. It was a little town in Montana. It was like Mayberry. I moved to Phoenix, and I got married and started raising a family. And in Phoenix, every house had 6-foot walls around it, and you didn't get to know your neighbors. And I'm guessing that had I not started to have kids, I wouldn't have got to know the neighbors, because the kids would get out a little, and then you'd meet neighbors. But I just knew that wasn't, I never felt comfortable there, because, neighbors, you'd walk over to a hedge and you'd talk to your neighbors, and your neighbors, and sooner or later there'd be a little alleyway through the hedge where the neighbors would go back and forth, and the kids would go back and forth. And I thought, someday I want to raise my kids, where I want to have my grandkids. And then I met the McLeods, and it just meshed. We had the same vision.
was that a chance meeting, or was it set up more?
It was set up. The McLeods knew development was coming, and they
Okay.
needed to partner with somebody that shared the vision.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I met the McLeods, they told me their vision, and I said, well, I can do that. they just told me what they wanted, and I thought, oh my God, that's what I wanted to do all my life.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So it's
Maybe it was fate. So how has Avamore protected the land from being parceled off to different developers?
well, and that's our agreement with the McLeods. The McLeods, Sandy and Terry, they are comfortable, and they are the kind of people that, you know, they don't have to have vast wealth and all of that, so they don't have to sell the land to a whole bunch of different developers. They want to make sure it's done right,
Right.
and they're very, very comfortable in their place in life.
Yeah.
So they said, well, let's take the land and put it into this trust,
Yeah.
and only you, meaning myself, can build on it, and we all have to agree what's being built, and all that was put in, so that, you know, we all have to share the vision. But gosh, it's been years and years and years, and every time I meet with the McLeods, which is, you know, sometimes when they're in town it's monthly, sometimes it's 2 or 3 months between meetings.
Yeah.
Never once have we discussed anything and not had agreed on everything that's happening out here. It's
Yeah.
been such a fortunate partnership. for
That's
both
amazing.
myself
I mean, I feel like that in a nutshell is why Avamore is how it is. Just to simplify it, just that very fact that it hasn't been parceled off to different developers and it has one vision makes it so special. And I can't wait to see, we'll touch on this later, but I mean, in 30 years, maybe the completed project is gonna be mind-blowing. It's gonna be really interesting to
It
see.
is. It is. You know, a community that's done right, they say the test of time is 30 years.
Mm.
If you can go back to a neighborhood that was built 30 years from when the last home was built, and it looks pretty much the same, you, as a developer and builder, you did a good job.
Mm.
My first community I did was 40 years ago now, that was on my
Wow.
own. I went back at 30 years, it looked identical, and nothing had changed. I went back again just last week to see it after 40 years.
Yeah.
And there was so much construction on the roads and bridges, I couldn't get over to it. It was gonna be a little, but my friends that had been by there not long ago assured me that nothing had changed.
Nothing had changed.
And I hope, well, my hopes are that I can hand out the last set of keys at Avamore.
Yes.
That I'm
yes.
still spry enough to do that.
Yes.
And then I hope that 30 years after that, I can come back to see that everything's still the same.
Yes. Can you explain to me the concept
One
of?
second, start the question again. Don't start with, try to,
Thank you.
well.
Can you explain to me the concept of villages and hamlets that the McLeods envisioned for Avamore?
Well, it's kind of funny because it is villages and hamlets, and I guess with Grandpa, or Cullen the First, he was probably saying, I want it to be villages and hamlets, which doesn't fit into how we talk.
Our vocabulary.
But that's
yeah.
what they, Cullen the First told Cullen the Second that, and then
Yes.
he told his grandson, Cullen the Third that, and that was the vision. And it started from a guy coming from Europe, getting off the train here, and he called it villages and hamlets connected by trails, where kids are safe, where you feel like if your kids decide they want to go to the next village,
Mm-hmm.
they can jump on their bike, and you as a parent don't worry about them because you know it's safe for them to go over there.
Yes.
And that's, the little town I grew up in, there was a little town every 6 miles, because that's where the railroad stopped and picked up grain and that.
Mm-hmm.
And we as kids would jump on our bikes and go 6 miles to the next little town.
I love it.
And our parents weren't worried.
Yeah, they weren't worried.
And
Safe
coming
out
home,
here.
sometimes you're tired, and anybody in their pickup truck would stop and say, hey, just throw them in the back, I'll give you a ride.
Yeah.
And nobody worried about that. Now, I'm not quite sure we're to that point, but someday I'd hope we could be back to that point.
Yeah, yes. So people move to Idaho from all over the country.
Mhm.
And I've seen firsthand how Avamore has been very, very good at bringing people together, creating an actual community. What do you attribute that to?
Well, that was the important part. Having lived in Phoenix, and it got to the point where, before I had kids, I didn't know any neighbors. You might see them when you go out to pick up your paper or something, but you never ever got to know them. And we had this discussion with the McLeods because in the little village I grew up in, the little town, everybody got together, you know, on the weekends. Everybody go up to the, you know, it was the town bar, gas station, and car wash, and everybody go up there every weekend, and it was the family, you know, it was the family would get there. And so we said, we've got to get people together. We've got to, because people aren't going to come in here and be preconditioned to think that they can go out and just, you know, recreate with their neighbors because they didn't grow up that way.
I think Avamore makes it so easy with all the classes offered at the community center. It's such a simple concept, but really just being able to go to a formal organized event where it's okay to go by yourself. I think that's really important, to meet people, and then maybe you don't keep going to the class, but maybe you met somebody. But I think those situations are more few and far between these days, and just to be given such a easy avenue for that here is huge. So we've done such a good job, and Dave England has done
Well,
an
you know, it's
incredible
kind of
job.
funny with Dave England. We decided, okay, we have to have a person that gets people out of their houses and meeting their neighbors. And, you know, what is this person's title? Or so we said, well, that is the art of living director.
Yes,
And, you know,
which is Dave.
living isn't just going to your home and living there and then going to work in the morning, not meeting your community.
Right.
It's getting out and knowing your neighbors, and that's his job. And
Yeah.
Dave I knew from college days, and he was the
Yes,
guy
I
that
found
got
that out a few
everybody
weeks
out
ago.
together. He got us all together, and he got things going, and I thought,
So he's a natural at that.
and he had just retired. He'd been working as a consultant down at Micron on a project that
Oh.
ended, and I said, Dave, I need an art of living director. You know, and I think you're just the guy.
Yeah. Yes,
So-
he's definitely a special guy, I think, in our community. So with Avamore being,
Bob?
sorry, with Avamore being a conservation community, we have taken some amazing steps to protect the environment. Can you tell me about some of those steps that have been taken?
Well, and that has been important. As I said, the McLeods won all kinds of awards for their conservation mindedness in running in this ranch. I mean, everything from, if you hike down Spring Creek and you see those diversion dams and stuff, that was the McLeods working on that to make sure that,
Oh, wow.
I
Way
mean,
back then.
way back then. They've been doing it for, you know, 150 years and winning awards from, you know, the livestock people and the farm people give awards for, you know, those kinds of
Yeah.
things. And they've won several for that. And I grew up on a farm and ranch, and it was all about taking care of the land, and the land will take care of you. And,
Yes.
And, you know, that's kind of both. That's in our blood, the McLeod families and mine, and we needed to make sure. So that's why Avamore has another person called the conservation director.
Yes.
You know, she's the one that sometimes scolds people for what they do or what they planted, or, you know,
Yeah.
she doesn't scold them because Zoe is so damn good at it. To making people and giving them alternatives. You know, we keep saying there are better plants than what you're buying in the valley, although in the valley you can't buy Firewise plants.
Dan, 1 second. Sorry, the mic picked that truck up. Okay, continue again, Dan, about the plants.
Well, you know, conservation means also putting plant material up here that is natural to the foothills. Well, you can't
Okay.
go to the nurseries in town and buy that kind of stuff. So we are going to start growing it in our own nursery. And just behind the barn here along the creek, we are putting in a Firewise garden so people can see
cool.
those Firewise plants when they're mature and see
Yeah.
how beautiful they are and how much appropriate they'd be in their landscaping here at
That's
Avamore.
going to be so neat.
You know, you don't see it much because the nurseries don't sell it.
Okay.
So we'll start growing our own, but for those that are really interested, the Botanical Gardens in Boise have a fantastic Firewise garden. They can go down there and look at the
Really?
different species.
I didn't
and
even
how
know that was
beautiful
such
they
a thing. So
Oh.
that's interesting to hear about.
It is, and they are beautiful plants when they're,
Yeah. Maybe they're easy to take care of.
they're yeah, especially the ones when we grow them here, because then they will be climatized to Avamore.
Oh, that's so neat. That's so cool.
Kim, wait a second. I want you to ask him about Firewise, but I also just noticed I'd left that, which it is what it is. We'll move forward anyway, but I left this extension cord in the shot. Damn it.
Oh, that's okay.
But it's not a big deal. But yeah, ask him. Say, I keep hearing about Firewise. What
Okay.
does that really mean?
Okay. We're still rolling. I keep hearing about Firewise. What does that really mean?
Well, these areas for centuries have burned. You know, in the old days when there weren't a lot of people, the lightning would hit and vast fires would tear across the land. So when you start building homes and stuff in there to protect those, Firewise just means.
Yeah, 1 second. Yeah, we'll pick that up. You know what really sucks? You guys can probably barely hear it, but that damn weed whacker, I can.
Oh.
Yeah, so we're breaking every audio rule in the book right now, but we're gonna move ahead anyway.
Should we shut that door?
I don't know, that'll help. Isn't that crazy? You can barely hear that.
Yeah, you can barely hear it.
I don't think it'll make
Didn't
much
even notice
difference.
it.
Yeah, no, we're gonna roll with it anyway. But, okay, sorry, Dan. That's a pain. Go again.
So we decided we were going to be a Firewise community, and we are the very first community in Idaho to be Firewise from the very first home.
Wow.
And that's why we have that, big book. When you buy a home here, you're given this. Well, you're given it on an electronic file, but it's a book about that thick.
Yeah.
And it's just living with wildlife. It talks about living with wildlife and being conscious that fires could,
Absolutely.
So every home we built is built with materials that aren't combustible. I mean, they will burn if you started a big fire, but if an ember settles on them, that's going to not start the home on fire. We plant, and that's why every yard gets inspected, their landscape plan, to make sure that if a fire does get close, it doesn't bring the fire close to the house.
Yes.
And then the homes that are built on the outskirts of Avamore that back up to the open space, every 5 years, Zoe or somebody she's hired to do an inspection has to go through their yard to make sure they haven't made any alterations that would cause them to be less Firewise, to where a fire could get to their home. And I know some people say, well, gosh, I really want it there and I'll take that chance, but that endangers your neighbor's home,
Right.
and then that neighbor's home, and so that's
Yes.
why that has to happen. And sometimes they don't like Zoe when she says you've got to trim that, or that's not an appropriate plant,
Right.
but that keeps
important, though.
us all safe.
Yeah.
Kim, so I want you to say to Dan something along the lines. You mentioned that wildlife management guide, and I looked through that, and I have to say, I'm in the real estate business. I've never seen any community put together an entire guide about all the wildlife that can be seen and what their needs are. I think it's amazing. I've seen a lot of the wildlife around here. I know we have more than 200 species of bird and one of the largest elk winter habitats in the state. Tell me more about the wildlife management guide. Tell me about some of the wildlife that's around here.
You think I can?
You can
remember
distill that down in
Or
10
you
or
just
20
say, I've
seconds.
seen that, big,
Wildlife management guide, is that what it's called?
the wildlife management plan, that big book I
Wildlife.
just talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Okay. I've seen that wildlife management guide. Hold on.
Yeah.
What was
This
just
is
one?
really
Just one.
cool,
Just
right?
one more point about it.
So wildlife management
Yeah.
guide. Don't worry about memorizing the species.
Yeah.
Just ask about the wildlife management guide. But you want to express like that is so cool. I'm in the real estate business. I have never seen any builder put the time into something like that to honor and respect the wildlife that's around here. You're
Okay.
basically trying
Yeah.
to show the extent that he's gone to.
Okay. I have looked at that wildlife management guide and it is just incredible. I'm in the real estate business and I have never seen another builder put such time and effort into something like that just to protect the wildlife around us.
that's what makes Avamore a wonderful place, though.
Yeah.
And, that guide will tell you, Avamore Spring Creek is one of the most prominent bird migratory paths in this part of the country.
Oh.
And you'll see birders out there all the time because so many birds migrate up and down Spring Creek. We've had some, at one time, one of the guys that worked for me was a very, very prominent birder. And
Okay.
so much so that the companies that make the really expensive spotting scopes would send them to him to use on the trail, so everybody would see him using it. And his website was one of the most prominent ones in the country.
How cool.
And
I did not
everybody
know
would
that.
come out and do bird walks along here. Well, and then there's all the other animals that are, and the McLeod said we need to be a community that lives with the wildlife, not run them off, because that's what makes Avamore special. So,
Yeah.
you know, if you look through there and you like birds, it'll tell you how to attract birds to your yard. If
Oh.
you don't want deer coming into your yard, then it'll tell you what not to plant to, so you not to attract deer.
Yes.
You know, even the fences at Avamore, everybody says, well, I'd like to put, you know, 6-foot fences with the prongs going up so people can't climb over. Well, you can't do that at Avamore because deer sometimes jump over fences, and sometimes they're not quite as agile as they think,
Yeah.
and they'll, you know, that'll do a lot of harmful damage.
Right.
Where
Yeah.
the little 4-foot, they're likely to get over, and if they can't get over, it's probably not going to hurt them. So everything is to protect this wonderful environment we have here.
That's incredible. I think it's so cool that Avamore shares their land and the trail systems with the public at large. And I think people are surprised to hear how vast the trail system really is. I think I've heard you can hike to Bogus Basin and Stack Rock from here if you really wanted to.
You'd be trespassing on a couple of places.
Okay.
But eventually we'll have a public trail that'll go all the way to Bogus. We've been working on it for years. We've teamed up with everybody from the city of Boise to the BLM and the Treasure Valley Land Trust of the Treasure Valley, and Land Trust has purchased parcels. And one day we will have a trail where you can walk to Bogus from here. It'd be a long walk.
Yeah, but you could do it.
But the other thing is, the ultimate goal is downhill bike trails for the mountain biking community with different levels. So you have the expert and the, you know,
Yeah.
downhill trails, long ones. When they've been put in across the world, it just, the biking community all have to try those trails. It brings tens of millions of dollars to a local economy. So
Wow.
someday, and I'm not quite sure when, but we get closer every year,
Yeah.
that trail will exist, and it'll help our whole area out here, you know, all the businesses and the Eagle, and
Because it attracts so much attention from mountain bikers.
they'll come and they'll spend their money, you know, at the hotels and the restaurants. And there was a town in Oregon when the forests were shut down because of the spotted owls, and the little town died because it was all dependent upon logging. And they decided, let's put in some world-class downhill trails, and they did. And the town not just was reborn, it was reborn and invigorated.
Totally
and
turned around.
And their economy is much better than it was before it was shut down.
That's fascinating. Sorry about that. Avamore was recently annexed into the city of Eagle. I know that was in discussion for a number of years for a number of reasons. Can you touch on what went into that decision and the benefits of the annexation?
Yeah, we've been working on that since, 2006 or 7. We started the application
That far back.
to be included in the Eagle Comprehensive Plan. And in 2007 or early 2008, Eagle annexed Avamore into their comprehensive planning area. And it was important to them. I know I worked with Mayor Nancy down there because it was important to her to know that Eagle had some say in how the foothills got developed. Because if it was all of this, you know, McLeod family would have been inclined, like, you know, some landowners are, to say, okay, developer one, I'll sell you 600 acres there, and I'll sell you that 300. It would developed out with just this hopscotch kind of building that wasn't, and it would have fences around everything. You wouldn't have the hiking trails, you wouldn't have the biking trails. And the McLeod family knew that, Because on the outskirts of every town, that's the kind of development you see. The 5 and 10 and 40-acre lots with fences all the way around
Yeah.
them, and there's no
Yeah.
hiking and biking, there's no recreation, and that's why they decided we have to do it the way we're doing it.
Yeah.
We can't
Glad
let
they did.
Avamore develop that way.
Okay. That's,
1 second, I'm just a paranoid, so I just want to,
When I slap the fly, I make
there's a lot of flies.
make sure these files are saved into these phones, into the recorder.